If you're buying consumption-based products from your SaaS vendors, you need to demand that that data is available through an API or some way of automated reporting so that you can put it into a central location.
Software pricing is becoming more difficult to predict. AI features, credits, tokens, consumption-based pricing models are showing up across the SaaS landscape. At the same time, technology leaders are under pressure to increase AI investments and demonstrate business value. At Zylo, we're hearing a lot about AI and we're fielding a lot of questions on the subject. And there's no one better to speak on this than our in-house SaaS and AI expert, Ben Pippenger. Welcome back, Ben.
Hey, Chris, what's up, man? It's good to be back. It's been a little bit, but I'm back on SaaSMe Anything, so it's fun to be here.
Excited to have you. Ben, it feels like software pricing is changing everywhere right now. What are you hearing from technology leaders?
Yeah, Chris, that's a great question. And software pricing is definitely changing. I mean, you think about the world that we've lived in for the past 20, 25 years or so around software as a service. It's primarily been seat-based, right? So, you issue someone a license, they take that license, they can log into the SaaS platform at that point in time, go in, get their job done based off whatever capabilities or roles and permissions they have inside of that application, which has worked really well over the course of time. But, as we're starting to see AI become more and more embedded into SaaS products, inherently what's happening is AI is automating a lot of the sort of manual work or clicking around inside of applications that people used to do, or maybe still do, but it's all transitioning. And in tandem with that, that means the pricing models are changing. So you think about the SaaS vendor themselves, the company that bought it got value out of giving that to an end user. They're now getting value out of AI operating and acting on top of the data that they have inside of that platform. And so what's happening is we're seeing pricing change from purely seat-based into consumption-based pricing. So SaaS vendors are thinking about, well, what's being consumed? Typically on the back end, it's tokens that are being consumed, but then they can extrapolate that into lots of different things. It could be like an abstracted unit of measure that they're tracking. It could be outcome-based pricing, which is the one that I like the best. If you think about it from a buying perspective, you're going to buy the outcomes regardless of how much sort of AI or automation it takes to deliver that outcome, which is great. I think on both sides of the coin here, it's good. It's good for the buyer because all of a sudden they can buy outcomes. If it's an outcome-based pricing model, if it's a case closed, if it's a lead created, they know what that costs, and then they'll pay for that being done or created on their behalf. And on the vendor side, there's margin that they've got to make sure that they're covering here. Like they are spending money in order to deliver that outcome. They're typically burning tokens. They got to make sure that the economics work and they can maintain the right margins that let their business run successfully. So it's sort of a trade-off there, value plus the margin side. But I think the thing that is the big challenge around this is just the unpredictable nature of it all. So, historically, you could budget or plan for your software SaaS costs really aligned to your headcount. So you know what your headcount is, you know what your headcount growth or reduction plans look like. You can then think about, well, my per seat cost is this, and based off of our usage of this application, this is what I need a budget and think about over the course of the next year or 2 years or whatever it is that you're budgeting for. That's changing, right? Because that's no longer tied hand in hand. You're paying based off of consumption, and there's volatility around that. Hopefully there's a fair exchange of value where you're paying for something and you're getting the value that you expect from all that. So, there's a big challenge around that. And that's really why this transition puts a heightened emphasis on visibility. So really understanding, number one, what it is you bought and understanding what are the terms and conditions, what's in the contract, what did you agree to, how is that set up, all that good stuff. But then also as you're consuming whatever it is that you purchased, that you're monitoring that, you're tracking it, you're putting models in place to properly forecast. If all of a sudden you're out of whack with whatever you purchased, you're able to really figure out, well, what's going on? Is this a good thing? Or do we have something happening that shouldn't be happening? We need to pull in the reins to make sure we don't blow our budget or end up in some sort of situation we didn't expect at the end of our contract terms. So yeah, that's really the sort of the foundation, I think, of the conversation for today, is that it's just becoming harder and harder to predict because of the transition that we're seeing across the landscape from seat-based to consumption-based pricing.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ben. I really like your thoughts on tying the investment back to the outcomes. I mean, I think that's one thing that can be consistent, right? Is thinking about what are you trying to accomplish from a business perspective, and the visibility to be able to connect those dots is incredibly important. So yeah, historically, leaders could forecast software based on budgets, users, licenses, much more predictability. But now with everything being tied to usage and this kind of volatility, it's a bigger question than just budgets alone. So if software costs are becoming more variable, how should organizations think about evaluating those investments, and what should leaders be measuring beyond just spend?
It comes back to what I touched on earlier, a little bit around outcomes. You need to think about it. Cost obviously is really important, but what are you getting for that cost? So that is a lot easier said than done, especially in the world of AI and a lot of the AI native applications that you might be running yourselves across your own organization. That you're spending money on tokens, but what are you getting in return for that? It's not an easy thing to measure because you got to think about who's using. Let's just use Claude as an example. Who's using Claude? How are they using it? Is it engineers? Okay, if it's engineers, what were they able to accomplish with AI companion at their side in order to write code, review code, QA code? Was there productivity gains as a result of that? Were they faster? Was it higher quality code? All those things need to be considered. But then you flip it over to, let's say, a marketer using Claude Cowork or Claude Chat in order to create a campaign, a marketing campaign, or write a brief or write a blog post or something along those lines. All that's going to come with a cost as well. They're going to be using tokens in order to get the models to run against their thoughts and ideas and iterate on what they're trying to get to. And you really got to think about this person used this to get to this output. What did that cost us? Was it worth it? Obviously, there's human capital costs involved with just people, but then have these AI costs on top of it. You really have to start to think about, well, what is a framework that we can start to measure the costs that we have, and then the outcomes that we're able to achieve. So all that transitions into software is getting work done. Like before, a lot of times it was people using software to get their jobs done, but now software is actually doing a lot of that work. So you really have to think about the shift again from, giving someone a seat to thinking about usage and consumption and the work and the output that came as a result. And AI is really the fundamental thing that's changing the value that software is delivering and how it's being measured.
Yeah, Ben, this outcome focus seems to be the thread here. So digging in a little bit more on that, as organizations are making this transition and vendors are making the transition as well, do you think ultimately that's where software pricing is going to land, where it's more outcome based? And do you also think that eventually organizations are going to just evaluate software wildly differently because of that?
I think we'll see a mix. I think you're going to see, every software vendor sort of have a different pricing model and probably have a few different options for how you could buy what it is that they're selling. I think a lot of the common models we'll see is what we call hybrid pricing. So hybrid pricing being, and again, just use Claude. Claude is a SaaS app. Like it's an app you either use via your browser or you install onto your machine. You can use Claude Chat to have a conversation. You can use Cowork for it to get work done on your behalf, or you can use Claude Code. And there's some other products they sell as well, but those are sort of the three primary ones. They have a hybrid pricing model. So in order for Chris, if you were going to use Cowork, you need a seat, you need access, right? You log in with your corporate credentials. And then once you're logged in, you're then doing activities that burn tokens that come with a cost. So there's a combination of, hey, there's a seat, and then there's associated costs with it. Salesforce is running a very similar model where in order to use Agentforce, you need a seat to log in, but then there's a credits. And what I've seen from them, it's typically bundled at the org level for the credits that you are then using to automate and have agents do work on your behalf inside of the Salesforce ecosystem. So I think we'll see hybrid pricing for sure. I think we'll also see outcome pricing. So outcome-based pricing, some examples there would be like Zendesk. Zendesk charging for a case closed or resolution of a case, or like something that makes this on your website to capture leads, right? If there's like a marketing agent that's sitting on your website to answer questions and then generate leads as a result of that, they may charge you based off of a lead created that's a qualified lead. And that could be completely, no human involved at all in a lot of those cases where it's just running. Take the Zendesk example. It knows your knowledge base. It knows history of how tickets have worked in the past. It can communicate through chat or over the phone with an end user to resolve that case. And it could be opened and closed without anyone ever touching it. So I think those will probably be the primary two models, some form of hybrid, and then, some form of outcome. There will be some, pure consumption stuff, but I think for the most part in the short term, we'll see those two models.
Yeah, Ben, thanks for that. It sounds like the complexity, or at least some of this volatility, unpredictability is here to stay. So we've talked about it conceptually, right? The way what's happening in the market and some of the trends. But let's talk about what IT, CIO, IT leaders, SAM professionals, what do they need to be thinking about right now? What do organizations need to be doing in order to get this under control, to have a better understanding of, are their investments actually driving to outcomes?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. I think the first thing I would say is, as your vendors are moving towards consumption pricing, you need access to that data. So you need to be able to get visibility to it. Yes, they'll probably have some report in their admin panel. They may have some alerts that you can set up that notify you if you're getting close to the top end of what you purchased. However, you think about the number of SaaS applications that are moving to consumption pricing. They're all going to be different. They're all going to have different flavors of what they're selling. I spoke at Salesforce earlier. You go to Salesforce's Agentforce page, there's like 5 different ways you can buy the product today. So, understanding what you purchased and all that's going to be crucial, but then also measuring against what you bought. And you need to centralize that information. You need to have standardization around reporting and alerting and forecasting for all those things. So I think that the first thing to say is, if you're buying consumption-based products from your SaaS vendors, which if you're not now, you will be guaranteed buying consumption-based products from them, you need to, I'm going to say more than request, like sort of demand that data is available through an API or some way of automated reporting so that you can pull that out and put it into a central location. You may think you can do it, let's say the top 10 vendors, you might be able to sort of one-off log into their stuff and monitor what's going on. But even for 10, it's tough to stay on top of everything and really have visibility and common forecasting, alerting across all that stuff. Second thing is, we ran a webinar last week actually, and we sort of highlighted some of the pricing around Salesforce. And we asked a poll question if they're buying consumption products from Salesforce yet. And a lot of people said they didn't know. So I think a lot of this could even be happening right now. And the people that should be aware of this aren't pulled into the conversations yet to really know about it. So I think just getting the awareness of what's going on is really important. And then I think the third thing I'd say is, if you're like strictly SAM or strictly ITAM or in procurement and you haven't crossed the bridge with your FinOps team yet, I would say that's really important as well. So the reason I think that's important is, number one, FinOps teams have been doing this for a long time. They have been getting real-time data, variable data. Consumption pricing has long been part of sort of the hyperscaler pricing model around your infrastructure. Think compute, think storage. So they have the skills and the right mindset, I guess, to really think about how you do this in a meaningful way with one of your highest spend areas of investment, which would be your infrastructure. So cross that bridge with them and understand how they've been doing it, figure out what interest level they have in supporting some of this stuff. I think it's going to be really important that these two groups don't live in silos. So you need to sort of come together and either be collaborating or even potentially bringing those two organizations together in order to drive the outcomes that you're going to expect to be driven for your organization.
Yeah, it sounds like AI isn't really replacing some of the core fundamentals we've been talking about since the inception of Zylo, the SaaS management fundamentals of visibility, centralized data, knowing what you're paying for. That seems like it rings true even in the AI era, and perhaps makes it even more important now. So Ben, I really appreciate your thoughts today. For everyone listening, software pricing is fundamentally changing. AI is introducing new levels of variability and consumption, cost. It's just more difficult to forecast and predict. But that visibility is so critical. And organizations need to understand where their dollars are going and what outcomes they're trying to drive, and pulling the data together to really understand if their investments are actually moving the business forward. The companies that do connect software investments to these measurable business outcomes will be in a much stronger place than those who are not. This is not a IT job. This is a fundamental business opportunity. Ben, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks to everyone for watching, and be sure to subscribe to future episodes of SaaSMe Anything.